Everyone, welcome to the first Finance and Performance Scrutiny Committee under the new constitution. I see some familiar old faces and some new faces, so welcome everyone. Some admin notes first of all. Please note fire exits are situated over there, probably over there, and there's one over there. Can you please ensure that your mobile phones are turned to silent or vibrate, as phone calls and ring chimes, etc. are distracting. Thank you. We don't have a very long agenda this evening. I would like to take the opportunity to welcome Dom, our Head of Finance. I was expecting to see Sam, but she's not here. Apologies for absence. Councillor Knowles, Councillor Campbell, and I assume Councillor Grant.
I've not received apologies.
Okay. Declarations of members' interest. This is the opportunity to receive any declarations of interest. Oh, sorry, I lifted it off. Yes. Minutes. Can we approve as correct the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 5th of March 2025? I assume that you've already read the minutes of the committee and hopefully any comments would have been made to Democratic Services. Councillor Livingston.
Just a couple of minor questions, reference to the review of Council's finance and performance, Q3.
Can you, what page, what line, sort of where are you?
On page 6.
Page 6.
The second paragraph down on page 6.
So appendix 2. Starts off appendix 2 on page 6.
It's a different page number than I have. It's just a simple question. A couple of questions. Members referred to the key performance indicators and it was noted there was an overall improvement. It was suggested that a briefing on KPIs related to planning could help councillors understand these measures better. Just wanted to ask if that is going to be, is that going to be followed up?
Yes, and in fact I did mention it to the head of planning to have a discussion with some councillors, and I can't remember whether that has taken place or exactly who was asking those questions. No. Okay, I'll follow that up, yes.
Okay, thank you. And the other one's a similar question. It was noted that there was a 100% council tax relief scheme for qualifying households, but it was unclear how widely known this was, or only to those who approached the council for assistance. The Director of Resources confirmed he would make further inquiries in this regard.
Yes, no, I do recall that one. We do try and engage with all customers. It's very difficult though to speak to people who don't engage with us. So it's obviously easier for us to talk and promote those things to people when they contact us and phone us and email us. And we do have things on our email signatures, etc., that advise and help and point towards things that are available. So we are as proactive as we can be, short of phoning every customer and having a chat with them.
Okay, thank you.
Right, after those questions, are the minutes as printed agreed? Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Livingston, thank you. Councillor Ellis-Brown, thank you. Are all in agreement?
Yes.
Thank you. I will then move on to declarations of members' interests. Receive any declarations of interest from members of the committee? Are there any interests, or is everything being registered? Councillor Emery.
Thank you. In relation to agenda item 7, review of discretionary council tax and business rates, I'd just like to highlight that provision would apply to Horsham Matters as a registered charity with interests in Horsham, and that my wife is chairman of trustees, but it's an unsalaried role.
Thank you. Item 4, announcements. There are none. Item 5, resolution of call-in decisions. There were no call-in decisions at the last meeting or since. Responses of the full council or cabinet. To consider responses of full council, there were none. The task and finish group actions from the property task and finish groups were approved at cabinet in their decision log, put it that way. Item 7, review of discretionary council tax, business rates and housing benefit policies for 26-27. I will hand over to the Director of Resources. I take it that you've all read the papers and are fully cognizant with them.
Thank you, Chairman. So you're probably wondering why we're talking about 26-27 already, given that it's only just the start of this financial year in May. But if we want to change the policies that we have, and here's a good discussion forum for influencing and changing those policies if we want to, we need to go through various consultations that then builds in a lot of time. And we want to get this underway nice and early so that we're not in a rush and we don't miss the start of next year when we come to do it. So there are 3 discretionary schemes. They have been, in my view, relatively recently reviewed. So last year we looked at the council tax support scheme. I think a couple of years before that we upped the business rates discretionary scheme to 100% relief, and the housing benefit modified scheme, which is effectively war widows, pensions, etc., that are ignored out of the calculation, is a pretty standard scheme. We've always had it that way, and it is, standard scheme across all different authorities. So my recommendation, and I hope you've followed the links to the actual papers and the policies. My recommendations would be to leave it relatively intact, but obviously if you have any discussion points or wanted to draw anything out or tweak or amend, we can do that. In the back of my mind, though, that obviously if we do go out to consultation, that's an awful lot of work, which can be done, of course. But if we're just tweaking it for a very minor thing, I'd be playing the efficiency card and asking you whether you really want to do that for the amount of effort versus the reward. Obviously, if we're making much bigger changes and things, we can obviously do that, and it's worthwhile doing so. We do also, of course, have to consult with our public, but also the other preceptors, so Sussex Police and the County Council as well. So shall I throw it open for any questions?
Any questions? Councillor Emery?
Thank you. Reading through the papers, maybe I've missed it, but I can't actually see what the actual costs are to the council in relation to the missed revenue that would arise from the granting of these reliefs. Do we know what the effective opportunity cost is to the council from choosing not to follow or to follow these policies in place of choosing not to do so?
Yes, starting with the smallest. So the war disablement pensions cost is, or was, for 2023-24 is about £8,500 there. The business rates discretionary relief, there are about, so far this financial year, about a dozen organisations that have applied for it. And roughly the cost of that, which is shared across government and us and county as well, without looking up, and so don't quote me on the exact figure, it's something around £20,000 to £30,000. So we're not talking a massive amount for that scheme. But we are, when we talk about the council tax reduction scheme, the actual cost of what we could collect is very significant, and I did have the numbers, which I think I gave to you. Thank you. It is, yes. So the scheme in total costs us, for all the preceptors, so that's police, us, county and parishes, £7.7 million. And obviously our share of that is about £850,000.
Right. Okay.
So we are talking big figures and big numbers.
Thank you very much.
That's partly because we're supporting, 3,500 or 3,100 working claimants and 2,220 pensioners as well on the scheme. So it's a significant number of people being supported.
So about £1,300 to £1,400 a head, roughly. Yeah, without calculating. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? So do I take it that the committee's content with those items? Oh, sorry, Alex.
Apologies, Chairman. I was reading something on my screen. Apologies. Yeah, I've got a few questions regarding the council tax reduction scheme. I was looking through the papers, and I see that the increase in the capital threshold to a flat rate of £10,000 for the 25-26 financial year. I was quite keen to explore how this threshold compared to that of other local authorities, and if we've done a comparison towards in regards to what other authorities have done with similar schemes, how that compares to what we're proposing currently. Thank you.
So yes, we did. We reviewed the whole scheme last year, and I suppose there's a wide range. So some start at about £6,000 as their sort of threshold, and all the way through to about £16,000, which is the figure that Universal Credit also use, 16,000. So we have landed somewhere in the middle. The reason we struck on 10,000 last year was because we used to have a sliding scheme. And it kicked in at 6,000, and for every £250 increase, we would take away a pound less or whatever the ratio was. And that went all the way up to £10,000. Now, the efficiency of recalculating every time somebody's savings change by £250 actually cost us probably more than just increasing it to 10,000 and just having a single cut-off. Now, of course, we could have cut that off at £6,000 quite easily, and other authorities do. Some authorities have nuances around if you're working and you're actually in work, then the limit is lower because you're also earning income. And if you're out of work but of working age, sometimes the limit is higher. And again, from a difficulty or a complexity, that then builds in, every time someone starts work, you have to recalculate and rechange. So for simple terms, it's obviously easier just to fix upon one figure and have less toing and froing and admin, money being spent on admin rather than actually money being spent on residents, was the sort of the view last time this was looked at. Now, of course, we could, having sort of run that for a year, we could re-review that and change that number. But I would sort of ask whether that's something that everyone wanted to do or not.
Does that answer your questions, or you got some more?
Partly, yes. If I can ask a supplementary, so that brings me on to the next point. So thank you for that explanation, Dom. But I suppose that brings me on to my next point: is how do the council verify, what methods do we have at our disposal to verify the level of savings people have when they're making claims? I suppose is my next question, because with a more generous scheme, the majority of people, no doubt, undoubtedly are going to be genuine people, but I suppose I have a concern from past experience personally that it can open it up to wider misuse with unintended consequences. Thank you.
Of course, and as with any sort of public organisation, we are reliant on people actually telling us the truth. It is fraudulent to misrepresent yourself and put a figure that isn't true, and we will follow up where we can. We don't have access to everyone's bank accounts, and it's not all linked up so that we can just peer into everyone's details, because that's not something that as a local council we're able to do. But we do investigate fraud where we can. It's usually on a sort of a tip-off or where there's an indication rather than everyone. So we do some. There will be, of course, people who are fraudulent and we don't always catch straight away. I would say, though, that eventually we will catch up with them and we will follow up and take them to court and reclaim that money where we can. But I'm sure it happens and it does go on. Not necessarily deliberately, but some people's incomes can change and savings can change, or they get an inheritance and they don't tell people because they don't remember to do so. Eventually it will all catch up with them in due course.
Do you want to follow up? Or?
Yes, just one final point, Chair, if I may. So that brings me on to my last point on this, essentially, which is in light of that, and I appreciate there's limited options for the council to pursue in terms of verifying somebody's entitlement. Thank you, Chair. I suppose that brings me on to my last question, which is this overall scheme as we're proposing it, is it too generous in a way, in that could we potentially explore, as in other local authorities, that sliding scale? So, for example, where you have one qualifying threshold for if you're in employment, and one qualifying threshold for if you're not in employment or if you're on universal credit, for example. Is that something that we've explored, or is that something we can consider exploring? Because I think it would be worthwhile, in my view. Thank you.
I don't think that question should actually be directed at me. I think that's for your colleagues on the committee to direct the policy. We can implement whatever policy you decide on. So if that's something you want us to explore, I can come back with some more data or go away to see how easily it can be done. I think it can be done. It's the effort involved versus the payoff, if you like, for it.
Has anybody got any other comments to add before I chip in? No, I think my answer to that is, whilst I understand where you're coming from, we see many examples of government stuff where grants come out or payments are made to people, and because they don't come back and inform you that things have changed, they then get caught out, and you see some very horrible cases of trying to claw back money from people who can't really afford to pay it back. The problem is, my personal view is, the system is too damn complex, too damn complicated. So I just wonder whether it's a good idea to go down the road that you're proposing, Councillor Jeffrey, because it adds complexity to the equation. And is that really something that's good? Bearing in mind that our Revs and Ben's team is very good, but is actually trying to recover on one or two things, positions where things have slipped a bit because of changes of personnel. So the question I've got for you really is, do we really want to make their lives more difficult?
I understand where you're coming from, Chair, and I accept those points. But my thinking was more, I'm not trying to be, particularly hard hitting, but particularly to make sure, my point was to make sure we're actually assisting those that do need the assistance and concentrating the financial support where it is really needed. My concern was, were we spreading it too wide, too thin, was more of the point of why I would look at a system or suggest a system like that. But I do take your point as well. It's obviously a capacity issue is one thing we have to consider as well. And then I fully accept there could be pitfalls in where people are caught out with unintended consequences. It would be useful potentially to look at models of other councils and local authorities to see what kind of issues they've run into as well, because if they've already gone through that process, then maybe that's something we could look at. But it's all dependent on outcomes, on how those schemes have been run, I think, which would determine whether or not I think it'd be something worth pursuing, because if they'd run into a multitude of issues where they caught out a lot of people unintentionally, then I wouldn't think it'd be the right road to go down. But my point on it was mostly just around trying to concentrate support on those that needed it, rather than being heavy-handed, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Does the committee think it's worthwhile asking the Director of Resource to look into it and then come back to us and see what he thinks, or Councillor Livingston?
Well, I'm going to disagree with my colleague, Councillor Jeffrey. I'm a great fan of the KISS philosophy of keep it simple and stupid. There's less risk and less problems. In this case, I would advocate that we keep with where we are at the present time. Thank you.
Councillor Halliwell?
To a degree, I would support Councillor Jeffrey's point of view. I think our main objective is to give the money to people who need it and not to give money to people who don't need it. And how do we do that? That's what Councillor Jeffreys is asking, and I don't see why that is an unreasonable thing to do. I agree that it may lead to more complexity, but at the end of the day, we only have a limited amount of money, and it is incumbent upon us to ensure that it goes to the correct places, not the incorrect places or people. And if we can have a, if you like, a review of what we can, what we can't do, and the implications of cost and resources, etc., that would be helpful to ensure that we are as efficient as possible in distributing the money that we are entrusted with. Thank you.
Councillor Lennon-Ellis-Brown?
I think we need to be mindful that, as Dom has suggested, that we need to ensure that it's not the cost of ensuring we get the right money to the right people is disproportionate to the amount of money that we're paying out. So it's more complex and more costly to run the scheme than it is to live with the risk of someone making a fraudulent claim. And I think that needs to be, we need to be mindful of that in any decision here. So I would think to continue as we are, as proposed in the papers, because anything that changes that could be disproportionate to the benefits that derive from bringing more complexity.
Councillor Emery?
Thank you, Chairman. My recollection from the external auditor's last report included a review of benefit frauds, and I believe that the status was green. So I believe that external auditors have undertaken a look at the levels of fraud in the benefits area, and there is not an issue for us to address. So in my consideration, if you could correct me if that's not the case.
It was green. I suppose it's the known unknowns or something, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
We're not finding the ones that actually are fraud, and we haven't identified it. So I'd never quite class it always as green.
Okay.
If it is.
We go light green.
At this time?
At this time. If I make a couple of supplementary, thank you. Do we have figures that you can share with the committee in terms of the number of fraudulent transactions? Because if we've got 5,500 claimants per annum, if it's 1% or 10%, and also do we know the value of those frauds that we have found?
I don't have those figures to hand. I can probably find out the numbers of cases that are investigated and then found to be that might not relate specifically to thresholds of capital, etc. This could be a wide-ranging sort of discovery across all the areas of benefits. But I shall see what stats I can dig out and share. So.
Thank you so much. I'm mindful to the points made before that we don't wish to disproportionately incur effort if it's disproportionate to the level of fraud or whatever. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add clarity to the point I was making. So I appreciate the comments that members are making. My point around the questioning of the scheme is not necessarily focusing on the fraudulent activities. I accept that is a small amount, and it's something we have limited powers on, but more to the point of concentrating that support on those that need it. Because to my mind, for example, if somebody, if households have, say over £10,000 in savings, what I question is, do they need as much support as someone with lower savings and lower income? They're getting the same amount of support as someone with a lot less savings in the bank, someone who could have, you know, £500 compared to their £10,000. It's about proportionality, I think, in my view, which is why I suggested the sliding scale. So that's what I was focusing around, rather than fraudulent activity, was around proportionality of assistance, depending on financial circumstances.
Thank you. At this point, I think, any other members got anything to say? We have some councillors who are not members of the committee. Any comments from councillors who are not members of the committee? No? Well, it seems to me as if we've got a division of opinion here as to, well, maybe the idea is to get the Director of Finance to go and look at some of the statistics and to come back to us with some data, which will then inform the debate and a decision. I think that's probably the prudent way forward, bearing in mind that we don't want to overcomplicate things, but on the other hand, there might be a simple, elegant solution out of this, which I doubt, but we never know. So I'll ask the Director of Resource if you can come back to us at the next meeting with some data and some information, which would be helpful. Yeah. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 8. Right. You have before you, or you have in the papers, copy of the annual report 24/25, which I, as Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny, have to present to the Council at the next meeting. Effectively, the Council Constitution requires the committee to report to full Council, and as I, as Chairman, do that report to them. I hope you've all read it. Still needs to be approved. Any comments, clarifications, or additions that go into it? As you can see, we were quite busy last year. There's quite a lot on the. But before I open the debate to the floor, just a personal word of thanks. I'd like to thank the chairman of the Task and Finish groups, of which there were 4, and also the members of those Task and Finish groups for all the work and effort that they put into it, because it's much appreciated. It's a lot of work, it goes on behind the scenes, and I think I'd like to personally thank you for having done all of that. So with that, I'll open the debate to the floor. Councillor Livingston.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for a very good, concise report. There's one small there's one small amendment I would like on section 3.4.4, page 24.
3.4.4. Right.
It's about setting up the Task and Finish group as suggested by Councillor Livingstone. It was actually Councillor Grant who proposed it. I supported it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Livingston. Any other comments or points to be made on this report? I will be going through this tomorrow with the other over in Scrutiny Policy Committee, but I will go to them with that amendment. Unfortunately, the Task and Finish groups that are running or reporting back all go back to that committee, not this one. That's the luck of the draw. But if I have your approval, have I got your approval to take this forward to Council with that amendment from Councillor Livingston? Can I have a proposal and second? All agreed? Thank you. Item 9, an update from Task and Finish groups. As I've just explained, all the other Task and Finish groups are basically reporting to the other committee. You can come along tomorrow and listen to the report back from the Fair Open Spaces one, which is something like 50-something pages, and an update on the battery storage one as well. I think that's it. Yeah, so those 2. So no Task and Finish groups work program. In your papers, you have a copy of the work program of the Finance Policy and Scrutiny work program. Any comments or questions or things that have been missed off or should be included. Councillor Ellis-Brown.
Early this year, I think it was, maybe latter part of this year, we did a lot of work around KPIs. Excellent work on KPIs. I wondered if there should be a further work on those KPIs. You know, I think we reduced them from about 36 or something to about 23. Should there be any further work on looking at reducing a number of KPIs and maybe presenting them in a different format? Just a question, really. Maybe Dom could answer that one, I'm not sure.
So you would envisage that as being a task and finish, or as a report from officers?
I think it would be, there was a small working group last time. I wonder if we should have another working group on that, or just leave it to the officers to work on.
Thank you.
I think it's always helpful to have councillor input because ultimately you are the ones viewing the information. So I'd be very happy to have a similar level of involvement. I'm not so sure it needs a task and finish group per se, but input definitely, because although we have, as you've said, improved and changed what we, or how and what we will present, I don't think that's ever the final version, and it will be an iterative process from now on and constant improvement. So absolutely welcome some help there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a good idea. It'll be more of an informal type meeting, but I would request that you report back to this committee as you go along. Basically, just keep us posted with the work that's ongoing, please. Okay. Any other points from members? Councillors who are not members? No? So that was the work programme. Item 11, the Cabinet Forward Plan. Basically, in the papers, you have the forward plan. I think this is going to be one that we have to keep an eye on, because the changes in the delegations and the way things are doing, some things basically are not going to go to Cabinet, but are going to go to Cabinet members. So I think that's something that we all have to keep an eye on, because we can still call those reports in and have a word on those. But I think it's important. The one that springs to mind, for example, is the Snows report, for example, which is going to the Cabinet member for planning, but it's not going to Cabinet. So things like that, we're going to have to keep an eye on. Just thought I'd flag it in. Looking at specifically the forward plan, any comments or thoughts on that? None from the committee? From non-committee members? No? I'll take it as read. Item 12, urgent business. There is no urgent business. Oh, sorry, Councillor Frank.
Sorry, just to say, I think Councillor Grant would consider it urgent that he's passed on his apologies. He's just messaged me to say that unforeseen circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, noted. Yeah, right, urgent business. Apart from that, there is no urgent business. So thank you for attending the meeting. I will now draw it to a close and wish you a safe return home. Thank you.